You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
Welcome to episode 107 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. I'm Dave Roberts. With me, as always, is my podcast partner in crime, the brains behind the show, writer, TV personality, blogger, Jessica Salaji.
Hey, just to clarify, I'm not the brains behind the show. There is no brains behind the show because we're talking about the legislature, but go ahead. I didn't do this. I didn't come up with this I didn't come up with the subject matter. I would never think of these stupid ideas.
It says here, according to the notes, that I've been doing a terrible job reminding everyone not to forget to follow us on social media and rate us on the favorite podcast platforms. And I am sorry.
I'm glad to hear you're sorry.
Well, it says right here I'm sorry, so I must be. How's your week?
It's fine. How's your week, other than being sorry?
Wet. I saw last week where one of the weather ladies, I think for CBS, put out a stat that we haven't had 4 consecutive dry days since Christmas.
It's miserable. Are you having flooding?
The creeks are crusting. Some roads have water over them, but I mean, not. I think we've got enough hills where we're not. You know, other counties are probably more likely to flood than us.
Yeah, we had school canceled in a couple counties because the dirt roads are washing away, literally. And they restricted travel on a lot of them. Yeah,
we don't have. We're paved. We're pretty well paved. We don't have sewer, but we're pretty well paved in Paulding. Of course, there's those outliers.
Right.
But I say, don't cancel school. I mean, walk up the dirt road. Get to school, kid. Of course, they cancel the school even if only 10% of the kids are having an issue, not because of, in my opinion, not because of safety concerns or educating the kids, but they lose federal dollars every day they don't have cheeks and seats. So they'd rather call it and add a day in somewhere else so they can keep those federal funds coming in.
Sure.
Ooh, starting off jaded.
You? There's no way.
So everything has gone to the dogs with 2 bills last week. This one, wow. Georgia bill would require veterinarians to contact police over microchip mismatch.
Yes, I thought it was important to use the word veterinarian in the title because we talk about stuff they do with actual, veterans all the time. I didn't want to use vets. Because our lawmakers literally legislate everything. But yeah, this one...
What did I do?
Sorry, what? Right.
I said, what did I didn't know she had to make microchip.
Exactly. But, so this one just came out of nowhere. I think they're on day... Monday was... They were maybe out of session. Monday was the 26th day. So they've got maybe 2 or 3... Well, as we're listening to this, or, as you're listening to this, there's 2 or 3 more legislative days before crossover. And so it's kind of late to be bringing bills, but they've been dropping them like crazy. I mean, 200 in the last week and a half or so. But this HB 886 is by one of my favorite people, Andy Welch, Tom McCall, and David Knight. And it's very short and very direct and says that if you bring a dog into a vet and the vet is required to scan the dog to see if there's a microchip, and then the vet must check the microchip against the system and whoever brought the dog in. And if the person who brought the dog in the animal, excuse me, not just dogs, but the animal in for care is not who's registered to the microchip, the veterinarian is required to contact law enforcement and file a report, and then they may have to testify in court regardless, like if something comes, if their court date comes of it, they're authorized to and be free of any type of immunity, civilly or criminally.
Okay. First of all, people get dogs chipped or animals chipped and then die, sell the animal off, put it up for adoption, do whatever. I mean, this is really a huge misuse of police time, because they will have to investigate all these complaints, and there's nothing stopping them from doing it now.
Yeah.
I mean, if Allie is chipped, so if someone to take her in and they scan her, they say, well, you belong to actually at the time it was her maiden name, Connie Snow. Now this is Connie Roberts, not the same person. Let's go ahead and call the police. Or when I had the kennel, when we were out of the country, and the kennel contacted me, said she wasn't feeling well. I said, well, take her to the vet. I'll pay whatever it is. Just take care of her. Man, this is. There's no way they actually think this is going to pass, do they?
I don't know. I mean, these are 3 chairmen, so, and it was heard before the Agriculture and Consumer Affairs Committee last Wednesday. It didn't get a vote, but I think that's merely because it was running out of time on the committee time, and they'll have plenty of more meetings before crossover and final passage and everything. They could always tack it onto something else, but and I hope that it's one of those things. I mean, I don't like when they do it to just say, if a constituent reaches out to them and they just want to make a point. I don't like when they do that, because it puts all of us at risk if it actually gets passed, but I'd rather it be that than they actually think this is a good idea, because especially, like, I think about rural Georgia where there's dogs running around all the time, and you don't know if that dog, I mean, if there's an injured dog, there are plenty of people who are going to pick that dog up, put it in the back of their car, and take it to the vet to see if it belongs to anybody. There's not even an exception for good faith efforts like that.
Right. And we say all the time the bill should be short and concise, but when the bill is short and vague, like doesn't give a Good Samaritan clause or anything like that, this has to be window dressing. But they do get to be do get to 3:00 in the morning on crossover day, and they're just reading bill numbers and voting up or down in the dead of night. They had however many legislative days coming up to crossover, then cram everything in the last few hours.
Great.
They're too busy doing things like designating a day to recognize purebred dogs.
So 2 of the 3 fools from the microchipping one are also on this one. I don't know why Andy Welch is not on it. The purebred dog day, I guess he was too busy limiting other freedoms elsewhere, but this one was David Knight, Tom McCall, and Majority Leader John Burns. So, House Bill 999 makes May 1st of every year Purebred Dog Day. Now, remember, we made the official state dog of Georgia the adoptable dog last year or the year before. I can't remember.
I don't get it. I know. I mean, I don't get the official days. It's already May Day, which is a socialist holiday. It's going to be 5 other things. I mean, how many months do women have to share their history with in March? It's also got to be. I think it's also Abused Children Month. It's also something else. It doesn't do anything, and this is what I'm talking about with this crap, that they act like we just don't have enough time, which is why we have to pass these bills at 3:00 in the morning when no one's watching. When you waste time doing stupid stuff like this, it doesn't do anything. Now I had somebody on my Facebook pop up and go, "Well, this is a Petco bill." No, this is somebody who has a dog breeder as a constituent, and they're saying, purebred dogs really get a bad rap. I don't care if you get a purebred dog. Mine's a Hind 57. She's also 16 years old, and still moving around. So maybe the varied genetic material is good for evolution. But it's just stupid. It's just a stupid waste of time. Sorry.
Why did you say sorry?
Soaking up the air out of the room.
Oh no! I mean, I don't understand why. Like I thought this was, well, it's a bill, not a resolution. So, and which is another thing I don't understand. Like, why didn't they just make it a resolution that they proclaim that, non-binding resolution? This actually changes the code section of state holidays. Like, it wouldn't be a holiday for employee reasons or state, but why are you laughing?
I could just, make the news. Georgia declares May 1st Dog Day. State employees to receive one more day off.
Right. Well, yeah, it's not the state holiday calendar, I guess. It's just the state holiday code section with other days like Ronald Reagan Day, Prison Chaplains Appreciation Day, and Water Professionals Appreciation Day. Like, they wasted paper for this. They printed this bill out to give to lawmakers at least 180 copies.
As every leadership program also, in every county chamber has a leadership program, just about. Every metro does. And most of them go down to the Capitol, and they get a proclamation done for, this leadership class in the Senate, and one done in the House. And I know that's all part of it, and I certainly appreciate the access to see what goes on down there and talk to our lawmakers. But at a certain point, when you realize that it's done for every group, I'm getting on the soapbox about just wasting time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if we all get together and call it Purebred Dog Day. I don't care. I don't care if we call it Labradoodle Day, which actually does kind of alliterate pretty well. I like it. Labradoodle Day. It's a day to recognize hypoallergenic dogs. That's it. I'm going to go ahead and qualify and run for state senate so I can push the Labradoodle bill.
Well, just make sure that it, I can't say anything without being so freaking rude. I'm so disgusted, and it's only going to get worse. Like, these are the least worst things we're going to talk about this week, so.
Speaking, that sound you hear is the broken clock. That's the state senate, state representative Andy Welch dinging because he is one of 2 times a day he isn't wrong.
Okay, so he didn't come up with this idea. He's the 6th signer, which means they just asked. He didn't have to do anything. All he had to do is put his name on it. So I'm not going to give him a whole lot of credit because he's still the one that did the journalism ethics bill and hate crime and all that stuff. He and Chuck Epstration, the freaking freedom fighting duo over here. But anyway, Ed Setzler, 2 Democrats, and 4 other Republicans have dropped a civil forfeiture bill, or civil forfeiture reform bill that would halt conviction or proceedings until there's a criminal conviction. Obviously, we support this.
Obviously. Like, literally everything we've been advocating for. I think it's because of my Fox 5 segment. Like, this is exactly what I told them to do, and they did it. So, finally they listened, I'm just going to say. Be careful. Don't dislocate your shoulder patting yourself on the back here.
No, this is something that a lot of people have been talking about for a long time. They did a civil forfeiture reform bill in 2015. It was like 100 pages long, and all it did was make the state and the locals have the same standards for reporting and procedure. And now we have that, but then they report to the Carl Vinson Institute of Government. There's this database, but there's no penalty if you don't report. So they did a whole bunch of work, and we still have terrible reporting, and we still allow the practice. So this literally strikes the language that says you can do it, and says that the criminal proceedings must be completed unless the person, the property owner, or the person who holds interest waives the right. And then it also, which is, in my opinion, I mean, this is bad, but in my opinion, this is the most important part of the bill, is that it says, if you are acquitted or if the charges are dismissed, criminal or civil forfeiture proceedings cannot go forward. Because right now under the law, it says a convict or a dismissal or an acquittal shall not preclude civil proceedings, which is the biggest load of crap I've ever heard. Like, if I'm acquitted, I'm not guilty of a crime, so I shouldn't have to prove my property was part of a crime or not part of a crime. So to me, I think that's one of the biggest reforms of it that's important.
Yeah, but how long before a crafty prosecutor in a county that needs the money says, look, we'll drop the charges if you waive your rights to the confiscated property?
Oh, I'm sure they will. But we can't stop everyone from being stupid and not
No,
knowing
I
their
agree.
rights.
I agree. I'm just saying that particular provision of the law, it should be you have to convict them.
Oh, I do agree with that, but I absolutely agree with that. It should be a violation of their oath. Like, I would go that far. That's how I totally agree. I was shocked to see that part in here because that's something that's been, I mean, one of the state representatives commented on the link that I shared about this and said, I was proud to sign on this bill. It was Darshan Kendrick and then another Democrat from Cobb County. But they were talking about, they were proud to sign it. And I said, well, how long till they screw it up? Because is this too good to be true? But then it has to go through the Senate. We know they ruin everything. So it'll be something to watch. But there's another one, just a smaller, I guess, tweak in the law, which says that assets, it's a civil forfeiture reform bill, but House Bill 1036 says that assets that are seized, instead of, they prioritize where the money goes. So sometimes there's a split. It just depends on how it's set up, what was seized, depending on what crimes and what legislation the seizures came from. It's very complicated. But if there's 100% and you're dividing it up and some goes to the law enforcement agency and some goes to some, restitution fund, sometimes a district attorney's office can get 10 or 15%, which is total crap because, of course, they have an interest to seize your crap if they're getting money. But they're the ones over the proceedings. It's different than a law enforcement agency. Like, they still get the money, but they're not the ones actually pushing for it in court. But anyway, this strikes the district attorney's office as a recipient and instead sends that leftover percentage to either the Indigent Care Trust Fund or the Safe Harbor for Sexually Exploited Children Fund, which, mind you, is the one that came from the stripper pole tax in 2016 or 2015, excuse me. So the reason they have to send money there is because they're not getting any money because people don't traffic people through strip clubs. But I'm not going to go down that. Anyway, district attorney's funding is going to be cut off, and I couldn't support it any more than I do if it passes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if it stays in its current form, no, I'm lay on that green button.
Right.
What's going to happen? And one of the reps on your page, I think, pointed out, or I know one of the fans on your page at least, is the sheriff's foundation will show up.
Yes. And
they're going to hate this bill. I mean,
absolutely.
They just are. And we're going to hear how this is a tool in fighting gangs. This is a tool, and it's still unconstitutional. It still violates the Fourth damn Amendment to deprive somebody of their property. I mean, it is it is unconscionable that we allow an arm of the government. As much as I support law enforcement, I do, and I love our sheriff out here. If he disagrees with reforming civil asset forfeiture, we disagree on this point.
That's right.
Doesn't mean he's a bad administrator. Doesn't mean he's a bad sheriff. It means we disagree on this point because the sheriffs are incentivized to like civil asset forfeiture. From their point of view, they're taking the ammunition away from criminals to continue their criminal enterprise. Not to overstate what it means to take a strap of hundreds away from a gangbanger.
No, and I mean, we could spend, and we probably should, because it's even though I'm so opposed to the practice, I still think it's a fascinating, like, it is a fascinating policy to discuss. But I was having a conversation with a friend who is a sheriff's deputy, and we were having actually a debate about civil forfeiture, and he's like, well, we don't do that, because it was created so that you could take down large enterprises like trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, drug cartels, like big. That was the purpose, to halt the funding. Which, even if you're opposed to it, you can say, well, I get that, I understand the reasoning behind it, but so we're having this conversation about it, and he's like, our office doesn't do that. And if you look at their forfeiture reporting, they don't have little $200, $500 seizures here and there. That's true. But just because that office isn't doing it, they have the authority to do it the right way or the wrong way. And so does the little podunk police department that has the authority to do it the right way and the wrong way. And they're doing all of it the wrong way and making lots of money from doing it. So I'm sorry that the office that is doing it right, it might, make their job a little bit harder, or a little more procedural, or with a little more paperwork when they're already doing it the right way. But that's a consequence of keeping the other ones in line.
Well, yeah, that's this as recollection, and I could be wrong. It could be before that, but this really came to prominence in the 80s, particularly in Florida and New York, with the cocaine trade. And it was a way of defunding the cartels. And somewhere along the way, they figured out this is a great way to make money. And they would actually brag about the cars and boats and stuff they take away from these folks through asset forfeiture, and then they would turn around and use it to go and, they used seized vehicles and turn them into police vehicles, or use them as undercover vehicles, or whatever. It happens with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and state Fish and Wildlife, where if they catch somebody taking snapper out of season, they can take your boat. So, how the hell does the state of Alabama have a Contender, which is a very expensive tournament fishing boat? I guarantee it was seized.
Right.
They found somebody who either was running drugs or whatever. Now, again, if I don't like just taking, even if they're convicted, if it's outside of the maximum fine. So if you're convicted of a felony that's punishable by 1 to 3 years in prison and up to $5,000, and then they seize $100,000 from you, that fine just became $100,000. It's not inherently incumbent upon me to prove to you where my money came from.
I know. I'm with you.
Oh, I know you are. It's one of those things that pisses me off. It just, why do I have to report carrying more than $10,000 in cash?
Well, and another thing, too, is that when it's a civil proceeding, you don't have a right to an attorney. The burden of proof for the state is lowered from beyond a reasonable doubt to balance of probabilities, which is like just basically totality of the circumstance. I mean, it's not, the threshold is so low, and you're talking about people who, like, if I had to go into court to defend myself and I couldn't afford an attorney in something like in these proceedings, I would struggle. Like, I understand the law and I can make my argument, but I would still struggle because I'm working against a machine.
Right. Right. Well, if you have a lot of your assets seized, if they go in and seize your bank account, and this is usually the feds doing it.
How are you supposed to pay for an attorney?
Right. Now I'm broke. I've got no way of paying for an attorney, and the standard of proof is so low that I'm not getting my money back unless I can prove, 100% that's mine. And real quick, I think I told the story when we talked about this before of a farmer who was given the advice by a friend not to deposit more than the 10,001 that requires a CTR, currency transaction report. So he told him, just always do 9,000. And he sold his crops and would get paid in cash. So he structured it just to save them from doing the paperwork is what it was. and he was putting in $8,000 and $9,000 deposits, and they nailed him for that's called structuring, and they wrote a CTR up for actually a suspicious activity report. So they had to write up on that one, and put him in for structuring, and the feds came and seized his bank account until he could prove that it was legitimate. And during that time, that's the money he uses for the seeds or whatever for his next planted crop. It about made him. And I don't know what the resolution was to it, but you're talking about shutting down a small family business until you can prove that the cash you're putting in is yours. But
it's bananas.
It is. So, a bill in Georgia House would eliminate the statute of limitations on rape prosecutions and other sex crimes. Sponsored by 5 Democrats and a Republican.
Not that that matters, but I feel like it's. I mean, I feel like it doesn't matter to us, but I feel like there are people who want to know, so that's why I included it. I mean,
no, I mean it's good enough.
And I think it's well, from the perspective of like, it in a sense, when we're talking about a state that's in the middle of a justice reform crisis, I think it's interesting to see who sponsors crime-related bills. So, anyway, go ahead.
Well, and now there is no statute of limitations if DNA evidence comes up.
Or exists at the time of the crime. Like if they have it but they can't match it to anybody.
Right.
It doesn't have to be new or old. It just has to be there.
Right. So 20 years later, you come up accused of something else and they take your DNA and then look and go, oh, we've got a match here. The statute doesn't apply.
That's right.
So this is
the current statute.
Right.
Which I think most people would agree is okay, like particularly with rape, because this isn't just rape, it's rape, aggravated sexual battery, and aggravated sodomy. So 3 of the worst sex crimes that are there, but I don't think there's many people specifically with rape who would say if there's DNA testing or DNA evidence of the offender, and you can't find that offender for 13, 15, 25 years, but you find him, prosecute him. Like, I don't think anyone would be like, well, I mean, he's a different person now. That's not the type of crime that we're talking about. If you have the evidence, I don't think there's opposition to that.
Right. This is almost just a I don't know, a Kavanaugh bill. 25 years later, I'm going to accuse you. It's a horrible piece of legislation. It doesn't fix anything because people's memories don't get better over time. So this is a combination of the Harvey Weinstein stuff, the Brett Kavanaugh stuff, and Bill Cosby. It could absolutely be used to terrorize people. Remember that night we spent together in 1984? Well, I don't think I consented, so I'm going to charge you.
Yeah. Yeah, so this opens all of those 3 charges up to indefinite, which, I was against, it was the Hidden Predator Act and it ended up being a different version, but the Hidden Predator Act a few years ago, I think also in 2015, was the one that said that you could come after someone civilly for a crime of a sexual nature, especially if you were, like, it retroactively allowed for a civil suit. And I was against that because I felt like it could be used as retaliation when someone ran for political office or became really wealthy or whatever the case may be. But, if I had to choose if I'm going to be wrongfully accused of something and I had to choose between paying some money and going to prison, I think I'd choose the money.
Well, just like we said earlier, but the standard of proof is much lower in a civil case.
Well, that's why people settle.
Right. Well, you don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So at least if you're going to go to a criminal case, you can defend yourself. You have a right to an attorney, and the prosecution has the obligation to prove your guilt, which it's more and more difficult the further time between the alleged crime and when you go to trial, which is why defense attorneys try to push trials out so long.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see what this does, because again, things that we're worried about, DNA evidence either being discovered or matched later, already exempt from statute of limitations. Crimes against children already exempt from statute of limitations. So the things that we think of with new evidence being discovered or something like that, this doesn't help that. This allows whatever the 6 legislators that sponsor this to go back and say, we're right with you with the Me Too.
Well, and statutes of limitations were put in place because witness testimony is unreliable. I mean, that's the whole point. And I think it sucks. We hear things all the time where a statute of limitation is 4 years, and I wouldn't say all the time, but we all have heard of cases where, and then 3 or 4 months or 6 months after the statute of limitations runs out. Good grief. They find someone, or something happens, or somebody admits something that isn't necessarily DNA evidence but could corroborate what happened, or all these things. You hear about it, but the court system is flawed, but the court system is supposed to err on the side of those accused of crimes. It's not supposed to lean towards the state or the accuser. It's just not. I hate to say that, especially in sex crimes, but it's not. It's not supposed to be tilted. You're supposed to have to prove. And that's why rapes and sex crimes are so difficult, because so many times it is your word against someone else's. And at that point, you're just sharing stories and trying to be believable to a jury. And that's not how the court system should work either.
Right.
So it's the intentions. I do believe the intentions are pure. Scott Holcomb has been, he's the one that pushed the rape kit testing bill. He was a prosecutor. He's a defense attorney. I know he does pro bono work all over the state. Like, he's reached out to me about stories I've written and helped people from my stories. He is I do believe I don't think it's necessarily I think it's a political climate, but not politically motivated, if that makes sense. But I think he missed the mark here.
Obviously, I think so too. Even if you wanted to say, what's the current statute? 3 years?
For what?
For rape.
Rape is 15.
15.
And then aggravated sodomy is 4, and so is aggravated sexual battery. Unless you were under 18, then you have 7 years, which is interesting in itself. But anyway.
But if you want to move it from 4 to 10, I think 15. I think a decade and a half is plenty of time for any evidence to come out, for any witnesses to be found. 15 years, and to remember a single event or something like that, especially with the narrow qualifiers that we're not talking about DNA, just talking about, I remember this happened 15 years ago. That's a rather generous statute of limitations to the state.
Well, and 15 years is a long time, but with regard to the other 2, 4 years, think about like up near you where courts are so slow, and sometimes law enforcement agencies are so slow. Like, I think in some cases you might be cutting it close with 4 years.
Yep, until we get a state court up here. You're absolutely right. It takes 2 years to prosecute a felony because we have so many misdemeanors clogging up the system.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to move from 4 to 8, you want to move it from 4 to 10. I think a decade is. Certainly decade's enough time for an investigation to happen, for it to go to court. A decade's also plenty of time for evidence to be lost and all that stuff. So if they want to move up the aggravated sodomy, or even move it up to throw that under the rape legislation and call it 15, I still think it's a long time for evidence to be maintained, but that's more reasonable than unlimited for the rest of your life.
Right.
But these are our opinions and not those of All on Georgia, and certainly not those of any All on Georgia reporter not offering commentary on this show. We have some local control bills. HB 523 by Casey Carpenter bars local governments from prohibiting short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO sort of thing.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just short and concise, just how we like it. The interesting part is how upset local governments are that, and they're willing to scream local control on this, but they take state funding on so many other things. But basically, it just says that single-family residences that are, on some sort of marketplace or partnership, you can't prohibit them from renting for less than 30 consecutive days. And the whole, well, we'll get to that, but it says basically that they can, by local legislation, you cannot regulate this out of a probability either. You can't make them have a permit that's so stringent that they can't do it. I mean, just it halts their ability to do anything at all.
And local governments are much easier to manipulate with fewer people. Just by the sheer nature of numbers of people that turn out and vote for local elections. So,
what do you mean?
What I mean is, if I get angry with an anecdote, house down the street rented out Airbnb, and they threw a giant party, and someone threw beer bottles in my yard, and now I'm pissed. I don't think anybody should be able to do Airbnb. I have a lot more access and be able to influence my local politicians than I do my state or my federal. So state or local governments tend to be the tyranny closest to home. Why shouldn't you be able to rent your room out Airbnb? It's going to be it's going to be neighborhoods complaining that there are too many cars in the driveway, stuff like that. Which if that's your concern, go move into an HOA.
Well, and this is, it says that if you have an HOA, there's an exclusion here. It says if you have an HOA and they restrict it, then that's okay because you opted into that. But the local governments cannot regulate short-term rentals. And what's interesting is that, I would never do it, but the governments restrict residential homes far more than the business they do businesses. I mean, everything is more limited on a individual.
Yeah, if it pleases the crown, might I erect a structure in which to house my lawnmower? Yeah, you've got to go and ask permission to do anything with local government. But it's the Airbnb thing in local governments. Wasn't there? What was the case out of Miami that they lost? Did Miami block all rentals? I mean, citywide.
Yes, I think so. But they're doing that. I mean, what was it? Tybee has done it. Brookhaven did it, and then Brookhaven got threatened with a lawsuit and kind of backed up a little bit. But they're doing it all over. And the thing is. So the argument in metro areas, especially, or more dense areas, is, well, I don't know. I don't want people coming in and out of someone else's home. If I want to rent my guest room to somebody 2 nights a week and make money, I should be able to do that.
It's one
like
of the
without any. I shouldn't have to report it. I shouldn't have to I shouldn't have to register. I should, because that was one of the things that they were trying to do too, was some of the local governments are making it, if you do that, then you've got to provide your information to the local government so they can maintain a database. Okay, first of all, then that's subject to open records requests, and I don't want you knowing. I mean, you're just, it's so unnecessary to have that third party literally hovering over my back bedroom. That's ridiculous.
And innkeeper is one of the oldest things that you can do to make a little extra money. I mean, watch, old, in the Old West, especially a widow would rent out her room, would rent out an extra room for extra egg money every week or whatever. And with the film industry that we have, so the city of Brookhaven saying that you don't want Brad Pitt staying in a house that in the area he's filming, and he'll be here for 30 days or less. I mean, and that gets done a lot, and I don't even know if the movie stuff is exempt, because people rent their houses out for a short period of time. In fact, I was in one the other day that they're going to film an episode of MacGyver in this house and have a fight scene, and she's renting the house out for a couple of days to the movie people.
Well, and don't forget what they do for the masters. I mean, half you're looking at a map, the far right, the entire right side of the state does different things and has special exceptions. They have special carve-outs for purchasing of cigars and certain alcohol things, and there's all these carve-outs for the masters because the state makes money.
Right. Well, the same thing with the movie industry. As far as being disruptive, when a film crew shows up and you've got catering trucks, film trucks, you've got trailers and all that stuff, it's far more disruptive to a neighborhood for a short period of time than having Airbnb being your basement.
Yeah.
This is. I don't know what this comes down to. Whether they're pissed that they're missing out on the occupancy tax with the local hotels, or it's a case where they're just pissed they don't have control.
Well, either way, I don't like it.
I put you down as a no.
Please.
Okay, we got you. All right, HB 937, Vance Smith, is a redo of a bill that the Georgia Municipal Association lobbyists squashed last year, which would prohibit local governments from banning building products and materials on single-family dwellings based on aesthetics or things not expressly related to safety or public health.
We talked about this bill.
We did.
Last year, a lot. 302, because, I mean, again, if I want to, it was very specific. It said that, as long as you're not doing anything that could compromise, you can't build a house out of feathers or something like that. You've got to be within the safety version of codes, but in terms of color, materials, I don't know, like what was happening in Bryan County was that they were telling them you had to have a certain grade of roof, and they set the standard at a price point, not a safety threshold. So because they wanted the houses to be of a certain value for tax reasons, like there's an incentive for government to have you have a certain standard of materials, right? And that's how they can box out lower income people.
Well, and it does not apply to historic homes. So if you're in a historic area, like you're down in Savannah, and we all love the mayor of Savannah,
yeah,
it still doesn't permit you to go to one of the historic houses and paint it black and turn it into Addams Family mansion. It does not apply to safety concerns, like you said. So there's so many caveats on this. But again, the locals want absolute control, and they want you coming to them to ask permission. But if it's still in the new version of it, what I liked was it applies universal codes that are on the state for subcontractors universally. So whereas as being an HVAC contractor, I've got to know what specific code Atlanta has that those inspectors want to see, or DeKalb, or what Paulding County inspectors want to see, when the Universal Mechanical Code is called universal for a reason. So it would apply those codes, universally across the state, which is helpful for anybody trying to do business around the state, because I don't have a county license. Oh, I got a business license. But I don't have my mechanical license is with the state, Secretary of State. It's not with the county. But it's not the state that comes and inspects. It's the county or city.
So where are you on this type of, do you believe that the state, this is the question, do you believe the state has a role or a duty to prohibit local governments from limiting individuals? Do you think that is a state role?
Yes, because you are restricting government, which is what the Bill of Rights was intended to do, was restrict government. So for the state to say, Paulding County, no, you can't tell people you can't tell people not to put vinyl siding on their houses. You can't tell people not to paint their house pink. It is the state restricting the local governments, which is, oddly enough, adding to the freedom of the individual. I've had the argument with several of the local people about it. One person is running for state senate out here now. That is, that's the one I kind of got jumped in his stuff about, which was that's not the role of government, Mayor. So yeah, I don't see this as reducing local. I guess it is reducing local control of the individual.
Well, yeah, the most local control is the individual. You're giving more freedom to the control local or closest to the individual. But I had a commenter who really lost their cool, saying, well, the developers are pushing this bill, so you're advocating for the developers because developers want to keep costs as low as possible. Well, if that's the byproduct of the individual, because I'm the individual who's buying the home from the developer, if I don't want what the developer is selling, I'm not going to buy it. People are going to stop. If the developer puts a home up of all purple houses with a roof that nobody likes the way it looks, no one's going to buy it. There's a market aspect of this too. So let that work itself out and stop trying to control every little thing.
And I've heard people say, want to compromise on it and say, anyone who builds more than five, this would apply to anyone who builds fewer than 5 homes a year, or something like that. So it wouldn't affect the small guys, but still screw the big guys. Look, even large corporations are made up of people, even individual shareholders. So saying it helps the developers, yeah, well, the developers employ a lot of people, and then they employ subs like me who employ people. So to say, well, it just helps the developers. Yeah, construction drives the economy. When construction takes a dump, the whole economy suffers. So that argument, and your argument to it is great. Is if they build houses that people don't like, they won't buy it. And this still doesn't restrict square footage. This doesn't restrict lot size. That I read. I'm going off of memory partially from last year. So you can still say that the minimum house size is 3,000 square feet. Well, who's going to buy? I mean, so it doesn't completely eliminate local control. So I'm a fan of the bill. I think it'll get squashed again.
Yeah, last year it made it out of committee. It was in the House Ag Committee, and it was controversial, but it made it out. And then he presented it to the Rules Committee a number of times, and I don't think they ever voted on it. But yeah, if it does make it out of the House for some maybe some miracle the Senate will squash it, because look at them. Look at them over there just limiting all the freedom.
Just look at them over there. Just look at them. So ransomware attacks prompt tough question for local officials to pay or not to pay. And this happened.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, I was just going to say, I thought this is something that doesn't really get a whole lot of publicity when it happens. Of course, they keep it on the down low as much as they can. It happened to the Georgia State Patrol or the Georgia Department of Public Safety, however you want to look at it, but where they lost everything because their systems were hacked and they were told, pay up or you're not getting your stuff back. And the smaller I think it was surprising to a lot of people that it happened to a state agency, but the smaller a government is, the fewer protections they have on their technological infrastructure. So they know they're at risk, and these hackers are demanding like $200,000, $500,000, $750,000. And now local governments are actually purchasing insurance policies so that they can have their insurance policy cash out, and they only have to pay like a $10,000 deductible or something, which is reasonable. I'm glad that that type of thing is offered. But aside from the insurance, because this is very new and most of them still don't have that, do you think that if a local government is held, if their documents are held hostage, that they should pay the ransom?
No. I mean, whatever happened to not negotiating with terrorists? I mean, if nobody pays, nobody will hack. There's no reason to. Instead of spending $500,000, what they need to be doing is backing their stuff up, doing whatever they need to do to keep hackers out. And I understand hackers are a lot better. The black hat hackers are often a lot better than white hat hackers. But, asking a municipality to drop $750,000, and then it can happen in the very next week.
Well, they could do it again. The same exact hackers could do it again.
Right. I mean, the very next week. Well, lock you up again. So no, I don't think it's a good idea for them to be paying off, cyber terrorists.
So what are they supposed to do in the meantime? Because and I know just from open records requests, they're not backing this stuff up. They don't have a second. Gosh, they're terrible.
I don't have a good answer for that, because here's the thing. If a hacker finds out that you have an insurance policy, and that's going to be available through open records. Mm-hmm. If a hacker finds out that you get this insurance policy, that's going to be their line. Look, it's going to cost you $10,000, but I want $500,000 to release your records.
Yeah.
And these guys are coming. I mean, it's from India. It's from outside of the country. It's from Russia. It's folks that we don't have jurisdiction over. Or it can come from down the street.
Well, you may never know, because they sometimes are demanding it in like Bitcoin and.
Well, exactly what they're doing is they want it in Bitcoin. They want it in crypto.
Yeah.
So
it can't be traced.
Right. Well, not just because it can't be traced. You can't just go cash a check for $750,000 or go and deposit it and not. I mean, people are going to ask where you got a suitcase full of hundreds. So yeah, they absolutely want it in cryptocurrency. It's one of the. I mean, there are lots of reasons that crypto. The government hates crypto.
Yeah, including taxation.
Most importantly for them, taxation. So I mean, I can't see it as a good thing. Where are you on it?
I guess I don't know. I mean, I feel like it doesn't. So I know with the Georgia State Patrol, I mean, it set them back in a crazy way to the point that they weren't filling any public records requests for like 90 days. They put a complete halt on and releasing anything. Traffic reports or crash reports for accidents and insurance, like it screwed up everything. And I don't know. I mean, they said that they didn't get their information back, that some of it was lost for forever. But then you think about something like a jail where they hack videos, and I don't know where I'm at. I'm back and forth, because from the perspective of, I don't trust government enough to believe that they wouldn't just claim they've been hacked so that they can abuse it. There's so much room. I don't think they should pay, because there's so much room for abuse there. Like, someone from the inside could set up everything.
Sure.
So,
well, I mean, it's extortion either way. There's the crime is the extortion. It's a crime either way. It's just whether or not they pay. And if everybody universally across the board said we're not going to pay, there will be some sacrificial lambs for them to test it. But other than that, if there's no money, there's no reason to do it.
Well, I'm inclined to say don't pay. The only reason that I appreciate the insurance policy is because if they are going to pay, I'd rather tax dollars be $10,000 versus cleaning out the reserves to maybe get it back.
Right.
I mean, just create more problems.
So, Jessica, your closing thought?
Yeah. We always talk about the children. What about the children? And this bill's for the children. There's literally a bill called... Okay. Chuck Efstration, Ed Setzler, and Matt Dubnick have a bill, HB 1074, the Georgia Loves Our Adolescents Act of 2020. Now, the bill is simple and is just supposed to require, I can't even remember who, some state agency, it's slipping my mind, to generate for the legislature a report that says how many families submitted applications to be foster families and how many referrals were made to private agencies in the year prior. So, I mean, they just want, it's not like it actually does anything. They want to call it the Georgia Loves Our Adolescents Act of 2020. Why? Why? I don't understand. Why do you have to make everything so freaking political? Just ask for the damn report.
Right. A subcommittee could do that.
Yes.
It'd be very easy to order a state agency to provide numbers to you. It goes right back to what we're talking about at the top of the show.
Well, and please tell me this. Please, this is what I would love to know. Why do we not already have, every year they have a comprehensive bill that does all the easements and property prescriptions between counties and local governments and the state for property reasons. They just do one big thing and then they do one big bridge bill. Why do we not have and they do it every year and they just update the ones that are for the next year. Why do we not have a recurring bill like this for all the reports we want for state agencies so that our lawmakers have the information they need? Because clearly there's a breakdown here if we don't even know how many people, if a lawmaker can't just call DFACS and say, hey, how many applications did you get last year for foster parents? You have to have a bill?
Right.
And you have to name it something stupid?
Name it something stupid and waste time. And then, again, on crossover day, act like, oh my God, how do we get everything done? My closing thought was not as close to home on Biden's good day on Tuesday. And as this drops, we'll be looking at the mini Super Tuesday the day after tomorrow. Or tomorrow, not day after tomorrow. But man, the folks dropped out of the race, getting out of his way as fast as they could going into Super Tuesday, and that it is very interesting to see the politics and how well Biden does in the South. It was just interesting to watch those numbers roll in. And I know you're not a national politics person.
I'm not, because it's just I don't feel like any progress is made, and that's even more frustrating. But he got, I wouldn't call it luck, but he was lucky in the way that it all unfolded.
Huh. Luck or brokered?
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. But
and I do like the
optics.
fact we're not going to have any more Mike Bloomberg ads.
I think everybody's happy about that, even if they were supporting Mike Bloomberg.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. So anyway, thank you very much for listening. For Jessica Szilagyi, for Eric Cumby, I'm Dave Roberts. Have a great week.